Alex Murdaugh sat in a police cruiser, rain soaking his white t-shirt, swearing he was asleep on the couch when his wife and son were butchered at the dog kennels. He told investigators he woke up, visited his mother, and returned at 10:06 p.m. to find Paul's brain on the sidewalk and Maggie shot 5 times with a .300 blackout rifle. He had an airtight alibi. He was the scion of a legal dynasty that had controlled the region for 86 years, accustomed to investigators taking him at his word. State agents didn't even take his clothes that night. Police had his statement, but they didn't know about a locked iPhone tucked under Paul's body. The 22-year-old had been trying to send a 58-second video of a Chocolate Lab's injured tail to a friend at 8:44 p.m. Poor cell service at the Moselle estate kept the file from sending. It sat encrypted in the device for months until a Secret Service employee finally cracked the passcode. Because of that delay, Alex's entire defense rested on a timeline he didn't know was already disproven. The unsent video contained 3 voices, a rogue chicken, and a truth that would destroy an empire. For over a century, the lowcountry region of South Carolina was structurally dominated by a single legal family. Between 1920 and 2006, 3 consecutive generations of Murdaughs served as the elected solicitor for the 14th Judicial Circuit, a sprawling 5-county jurisdiction. This 86-year monopoly represents the longest consecutive prosecutorial tenure by a single family in United States history. Concurrently, the family founded a highly lucrative personal injury law firm that wielded immense civil influence. This dual control over both the state's criminal prosecution apparatus and private civil litigation created an insulated legal fiefdom. Therefore, when Colleton County Sheriff's deputies rolled onto the Moselle estate on June 7, 2021, they were stepping onto Murdaugh territory. The man waiting for them was not a suspect, but an institution. Let us examine the immediate aftermath at the crime scene. Maggie Murdaugh lay dead from multiple rifle rounds, while Paul was killed by 2 shotgun blasts.
The violence was clinical, efficient, and devastating.
Yet, Alex Murdaugh stood near the bodies in a clean white t-shirt and shorts. State Law Enforcement Division agents noted he was sweating heavily in the humid night air, but there was no blood on his clothing. This presents a physical contradiction. To fire a shotgun at close range produces significant blowback. Alex claimed he checked their pulses and tried to turn Paul's body over, causing the young man's cell phone to fall out of his pocket. But the lack of physical transfer told a different story. How does a man handle 2 newly deceased victims without staining his clothes? Investigators treated him with extreme deference. They did not search the main house for bloody garments that night. They conducted their first interview with him inside a police vehicle, where he sat beside a lawyer friend from his own firm. He wept, swore he had been asleep up at the main house, and offered up a theory that the murders were retaliation for a fatal boat crash involving Paul 2 years prior, 9/11. It was a neat, logical narrative. He even provided his own phone and gave them the passcode to Maggie's device. He was cooperative, playing the role of the devastated patriarch perfectly. Therefore, the local authorities looked outward, searching for vigilantes in the dark. But they ignored the digital breadcrumbs left in the dirt. Paul's phone was dead. Its battery expired at 10:34 p.m., shortly after Alex called 911. It remained locked for months. Maggie's phone was found the next day, discarded on the side of a road a quarter-mile from the estate. The physical evidence at Moselle was washed away by rain and compromised by dozens of family friends walking through the crime scene. The physical world had failed the investigators. But the digital world remembers everything. In March of the following year, a civilian employee for the Secret Service bypassed the encryption on Paul's iPhone. Suddenly, state agents had access to a millisecond by millisecond ledger of the final hours of Paul and Maggie's lives. The data did not match the grieving father's timeline. Alex had stated he ate dinner with his family, fell asleep on the couch, woke up, and drove to visit his ailing mother in Almeida.
He explicitly told agents he never went down to the dog kennels before leaving.
But cellular archaeology proved this was a complete fabrication. The foundation of Alex Murdaugh's freedom rested on his silence, but the very devices his family carried were screaming the truth. Let us reconstruct the evening of June 7, 2021, using the digital artifacts. At 6:09 p.m., Maggie texted Paul, asking if he wanted a foot massage before she headed home. By 7:04 p.m., Paul's device registered his physical arrival at the Moselle residence. Alex's phone showed him taking 200 steps around the property between 7:15 and 7:21 p.m., meaning he was awake and active. Maggie was also moving around the main house, having unplugged her phone from her car at 8:17 p.m. At 7:39 p.m., Paul filmed a Snapchat video of a poorly planted tree. In it, Alex is seen wearing long pants and a clean blue button-down shirt. This is a critical detail. When police arrived hours later, Alex was in shorts and a white t-shirt. Where did the blue shirt go? The state would never find it. Why would a man change clothes immediately before visiting his mother with dementia, unless his original outfit was compromised? The family moved down to the kennels shortly after 8:30 p.m. Paul was communicating with his childhood friend, Rogan Gibson. Rogan had left his chocolate lab, Cash, at the Moselle kennels and was worried about an injury to the dog's tail. At 8:40 p.m., Paul and Rogan spoke on the phone for 4 minutes. Rogan later testified that he thought he heard Alex's voice in the background during that call. 4 minutes later, Paul attempted to send visual proof of the dog's tail to his friend. At 8:44 and 49 seconds, Paul's camera activated. The video recorded for exactly 58 seconds. It showed Cash the dog moving inside a cage. More importantly, its high-fidelity microphone captured a conversation. Maggie's voice rings out, pointing at the family's yellow lab, Bubber.
He's got a bird in his mouth.
She says.
It's a guinea.
Alex replies.
It's a chicken.
Maggie counters.
Come here, Bubba.
Alex yells. It is a mundane, everyday domestic dispute over a bird. But its existence is catastrophic for Alex Murdaugh. The recording definitively places him at the scene of the murders, interacting with the victims, less than 5 minutes before they are killed. Paul's phone read its final incoming text message at 8:48 p.m. and 59 seconds. Maggie's phone read its final text 28 seconds later. After that, both devices locked and never actively responded to a human touch again. At 8:53 p.m., Maggie's phone recorded a sudden change in orientation, shifting from landscape to portrait mode. The camera sensor briefly activated for 1 second, as if someone was attempting facial recognition. But it was not Maggie. The phone switched orientation again at 8:55 p.m., indicating physical manipulation by a secondary party. The killer had the device. Meanwhile, Alex's phone, which had been completely motionless since 8:09 p.m., suddenly sprang to life. At 9:02 p.m., the device logged a rapid burst of movement, tracking 283 steps over 4 minutes. He was moving fast, pacing the equivalent of multiple football fields. 2 minutes later, at 9:06 p.m., the telematics system in his Chevrolet Suburban recorded the engine starting and the gear shifting out of park. He was leaving the Moselle estate, heading to his mother's house in Almeida. But as he drove away, the frantic construction of an alibi commenced. Between 9:06 p.m. and 10:03 p.m., Alex called his deceased wife's phone 5 separate times. He texted her at 9:08 p.m. to say he was going to check on his mother and would be right back. He made additional calls to other family members and friends, ensuring his number appeared in their call logs. He arrived at Almeida at 9:22 p.m. and stayed for only 20 minutes. During the trial, the caregiver for Alex's mother testified about this visit. She noted it was an unusually late stop. But Alex needed a witness.
He needed someone to confirm he was far away from the kennels when the guns went off.
Therefore, he drove back to Moselle, his digital footprint carefully curated to show a concerned husband arriving home to an empty house. At 10:01 p.m., the Suburban's telematics showed the vehicle arriving back at the main residence. Alex claimed he looked for his wife and son there, but found nothing. He then drove down to the kennels. At 10:06 p.m., he dialed 911. His performance on that call would become a central pillar of the prosecution's case. He sounded hysterical, breathing heavily into the receiver. He told the dispatcher his wife and son had been shot badly. He repeatedly interjected that he had been gone for hours, proactively inserting his alibi into the emergency record before the police even arrived. When the dispatcher told him not to touch the bodies, he replied that he already had, establishing a preemptive reason for any trace evidence that might later be found on his skin. He had controlled the narrative from the moment the police arrived. He dictated the timeline, shaped the investigative focus, and leveraged his family's 86-year legacy of power to secure the benefit of the doubt. But the 58-second recording of a dog with a bird in its mouth was a time bomb waiting in the evidence locker. And when the trial finally began, the defense would be forced into a devastating pivot that no amount of lowcountry influence could fix. The physical evidence at the crime scene was a study in contradictions. The violence inflicted on Paul and Maggie Murdaugh was savage and absolute. Paul was struck first. The first shot, a load of buckshot, hit him in the chest. The second shot came from a dramatic upward angle, grazing his shoulder, entering his neck, and blowing his brain out through the top of his skull. The force was so immense that his brain was severed from his body. Maggie was shot while running. She suffered no defensive wounds because her back was turned when the first rounds from their .300 blackout rifle struck her. As she fell to the ground, the shooter approached and delivered a final, point-blank execution shot to the back of her head.
The defense argued this required two shooters.
Two different weapons, firing in rapid succession, suggested a coordinated ambush. But the prosecution presented a darker theory, a family annihilator using the weapons he had at his disposal in the estate's gun room, switching firearms to obscure his involvement. When police arrived, Alex was wearing shorts and a pristine white t-shirt. State Law Enforcement Division agents noted he was sweating heavily in the thick South Carolina humidity, but his clothes bore no trace of the slaughter. No bone fragments. No high-velocity blood spatter. This became a critical vulnerability in his story. In his 911 call, and again to the responding deputies, Alex volunteered that he had touched the bodies. He said he tried to turn Paul over. He said he checked Maggie's pulse. How does a man handle two victims of catastrophic ballistic trauma without getting a single drop of blood on his white shirt? The digital timeline provided the answer. At 7:39 p.m., an hour before the murders, Paul filmed a Snapchat video of a poorly planted tree. In that footage, Alex Murdaugh is clearly visible. He is wearing long khaki pants and a light blue button-down shirt. That blue shirt vanished. It was never found in the laundry at Moselle. It was never found at his mother's house. It simply ceased to exist. The absence of the blue shirt indicated premeditated destruction of evidence. The prosecution pointed to the water hose at the kennels. In the 58-second video recorded at 8:44 p.m., the hose is neatly coiled. Yet, crime scene photos taken hours later showed puddles of water in inappropriate locations around the feed room where Paul died. The state argued Alex used the hose to wash the gore from his skin, stripped off the contaminated blue shirt and pants, and changed into the clean white t-shirt before fleeing the scene. He had exactly 11 minutes to clean himself thoroughly before starting his Chevrolet Suburban at 9:06 p.m. But why? Why would a scion of the lowcountry butcher his legacy? The answer lay in the collapse of his hidden life. Alex Murdaugh was not just a grieving father. He was a desperate, cornered criminal.
For years, he had operated a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme from within his own law firm.
He diverted clients' settlement funds into a fake bank account under the name
Forge.
using the stolen money to cover massive personal debts and a voracious opioid habit. On the morning of June 7, 2021, the firm's CFO confronted him. She demanded documentation for hundreds of thousands of dollars in missing fees. His financial house of cards was hours away from collapsing. Furthermore, he was facing a looming hearing in a wrongful death lawsuit. 2 years prior, Paul had drunkenly crashed a boat, killing a young woman named Mallory Beach. The plaintiffs were demanding Alex's financial disclosures. If those books were opened, his thefts would be exposed. He would lose his license, his reputation, and his freedom. Therefore, he needed a catastrophic distraction. A tragedy so profound that it would immediately halt all inquiries into his finances. The murders brought him exactly that. The firm backed off. The civil lawsuit was delayed. He became an untouchable figure of sympathy. However, the trial in early 2023 dragged all of these secrets into the harsh light of the Colleton County courtroom. The state's lead prosecutor, Colleton Waters, meticulously laid out the digital trap. SLED Lieutenant Britt Dove, an expert in cell phone forensics, took the stand. He transformed the raw data from the victims' phones into a silent witness. Dove testified that at 8:49 p.m. and 31 seconds, Maggie's phone locked. It never answered another text. It never made another call. 4 seconds later, at 8:49 p.m. and 35 seconds, Rogan Gibson called Paul's phone. Paul did not answer. The digital heartbeat of both victims flatlined within seconds of each other. During this exact window, Alex Murdaugh's phone lay completely motionless up at the main house. It had not registered a single step since 8:09 p.m. But at 9:02 p.m. it woke up. Between 9:02 and 9:06 p.m. Alex's phone recorded 283 steps. It was a flurry of rapid, frantic movement. He was pacing the length of multiple football fields in minutes. At 9:06 p.m.
The telematics in his Suburban showed the engine starting.
he drove to his mother's house in Alameda, manufacturing his electronic alibi along the way by calling Maggie multiple times. But the cell data revealed another damning detail. While Alex was supposedly driving, Maggie's phone, which he claimed he did not have, recorded its final physical movement. At 9:06 p.m. it shifted orientation from landscape to portrait mode. The killer had tossed it onto the side of Moselle Road, just a quarter-mile from the estate, right along the path Alex took to Alameda. The defense, led by Dick Hauputlian and Jim Griffin, pushed back hard. They highlighted the lack of direct evidence. No DNA. No murder weapons. They pointed out that state agents had failed to secure the victims' phones in Faraday bags, potentially allowing data to be overwritten or compromised. They painted a picture of a sloppy, tunnel vision investigation by SLED, an agency that focused solely on Alex and ignored the possibility of vigilantes targeting Paul over the boat crash. But they could not ignore the 58-second video. The audio was undeniable. The prosecution called Rogan Gibson to the stand. Gibson had grown up with Paul and Buster. He knew Alex Murdaugh as a second father. Prosecutor Waters played the kennel video and asked Gibson to identify the voices. Gibson named Paul and Maggie. Then Waters asked about the third voice, the one calling for the dog Bubber.
Is that Alex Murdaugh?
Waters asked.
Yes, sir.
Gibson replied.
How sure are you? 100%.
Will Loving, another close family friend, followed Gibson to the stand. He was the recipient of the earlier Snapchat video showing Alex in the blue shirt. He, too, listened to the kennel recording. He, too, confirmed Alex's voice with absolute certainty. The defense's claim that Alex had been napping at the main house was systematically dismantled by the very people who loved his family. The airtight alibi was dead. Therefore, the defense was forced to execute one of the most perilous maneuvers in criminal law. They had to put the defendant on the stand. When Alex Murdaugh walked to the witness box, the courtroom went silent. He was a man accustomed to controlling the narrative, a man whose family portrait hung on the walls of the circuit.
But now he was fighting for his life.
He wept as he spoke about finding the bodies. He rocked back and forth, a picture of a broken patriarch. And then, under oath, he confessed to the lie that had defined the investigation for 20 months. He admitted he was at the kennels at 8:44 p.m. He admitted his voice was on the video. He blamed his deception on his addiction. He claimed that when SLED agents began swabbing his hands for gunshot residue that night, his opioid-induced paranoia flared. He didn't trust the police. He panicked, lied about his whereabouts, and then found himself trapped in the faucet.
Once I lied.
He told the jury.
I continued to lie.
He offered a new timeline. He testified that he rode a golf cart down to the kennels, wrestled a chicken away from the dog Bubber, and then immediately drove back to the main house. He estimated he was back at the house by 8:49 p.m., claiming he lay down on the couch for a brief nap. Minutes later, he got up, got into his Suburban, and drove to visit his mother. He swore he did not shoot his wife and son. Prosecutor Colleton Waters approached the podium for cross-examination. He did not ask about the dogs. He asked about the mechanics of a liar. Waters hammered Alex on his ability to look his friends, his surviving son, and law enforcement in the eye and lie effortlessly. Waters tracked the new timeline against the unforgiving digital clock. If the video ended at 8:45 p.m. and 45 seconds, and the victim's phones went dead at 8:49 p.m., Alex was asking the jury to believe he managed to leave the kennels in a narrow 3-minute window, just moments before a phantom team of assassins emerged from the darkness to execute his wife and son without alerting the dogs or leaving a trace.
Did you jet down there and jet back?
Waters asked, highlighting the absurdity of the condensed time frame.
No, sir.
Alex replied smoothly.
I didn't jet down there, and I didn't jet back.
Alex maintained his composure, sparring with the prosecutor over the definition of his.
New story. Mr. Waters, I'm answering your question.
He countered. And you're using words that I'm not using. And that's your categorization. He admitted to his financial crimes. He admitted to stealing from the vulnerable. But he drew a hard line at murder. The jury watched a master manipulator attempt to thread the needle of a disproven alibi. He had the charm of a southern gentleman and the calculating mind of an apex predator. But the trial was no longer just about cell phone data and blood spatter. As the defense and prosecution prepared their closing arguments, an entirely different threat to the judicial process was quietly unfolding in the shadows of the courthouse, one orchestrated not by the defendant, but by the very official tasked with keeping the scales of justice balanced. On March 1, 2023, the prosecution and defense delivered their closing arguments to a captivated courtroom. Lead prosecutor Colleton Waters summarized a case built entirely on digital breadcrumbs. He reminded the jury that Maga's phone locked at 8:49 p.m. and 31 seconds. Paul's phone received its final text at 8:49 p.m. and 35 seconds. He meticulously mapped out the final minutes, noting that Alex's phone, which had been perfectly motionless up at the main house for nearly an hour, suddenly recorded a rapid burst of 283 steps immediately after the victim's phones went dead. He painted a picture of a desperate man whose financial world was collapsing, who used his family's armory to buy himself an ultimate distraction. The defense countered that the state's timeline was impossibly tight. Defense attorney Jim Griffin argued that if the murders happened at 8:49 p.m., Alex had barely 10 minutes to clean himself of the catastrophic biological transfer caused by a close-range shotgun blast, dispose of the weapons, and drive away at 9:06 p.m. Griffin emphasized that whoever shot Paul had to be standing no more than 3 feet away when the boy's skull ruptured, meaning the killer would be covered in blood and tissue. He argued that Alex's trip to Alameda to visit his mother with Alzheimer's was a perfectly reasonable, innocent errand.
But the 58-second video of the chocolate lab was a wall the defense could not climb.
The jury received the case late in the afternoon on March 2nd. The trial had lasted 6 weeks. The state had called over 60 witnesses and introduced hundreds of pieces of complex forensic evidence. Therefore, the public expected days of deliberation. But the 12 Colleton County locals reached a verdict in less than an hour. They found Alex Murdaugh guilty of 2 counts of murder. The following morning, Judge Clifton Newman presided over the sentencing. He looked down from the bench at a man he had known professionally for decades.
I know you have to see Paul and Maggie during the nighttime when you're attempting to go to sleep.
The judge said, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom.
I'm sure they come and visit you. All day and every night.
Alex replied. Judge Newman handed down 2 consecutive life sentences. The scion of the 14th Judicial Circuit was shackled and transported to a maximum security prison. The dynasty was officially dead. The blast radius of the Moselle murders extended far beyond Alex Murdaugh. The investigation into the killings inadvertently exposed an 86-year network of lowcountry corruption. The state and federal governments systematically dismantled Alex's financial empire. The trial functioned as an excavation, laying bare how he had stolen millions of dollars from clients, colleagues, and even the family of his own deceased housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, taking the insurance money meant for her sons after she died in a fall at his home. In April 2024, United States District Judge Richard Gurgel sentenced Alex to 40 years in federal prison for these financial crimes. The people who facilitated his thefts faced their own reckonings. Russell Laffitte, a former CEO of Palmetto State Bank, was convicted of helping Alex launder the stolen settlement money. In September 2023, Laffitte reported to federal prison to begin serving a 7-year term. Corey Fleming, Alex's longtime friend and former college roommate, also pleaded guilty to his role in the financial schemes. The men who had operated above the law for decades were now inmates. The intense scrutiny also reached backward in time, disturbing old ghosts. On July 8, 2015, a 19-year-old nursing student named Stephen Smith was found dead on a rural road in Hampton County. His skull had suffered severe blunt force trauma. The location was approximately 15 miles from the Moselle estate.
Local authorities initially ruled the death a hit and run, despite a lack of vehicular debris at the scene.
Smith was a high school classmate of Alex's older son, Buster. During the original 2015 investigation, witnesses repeatedly brought up the Murdaugh name, but the case went cold. However, the Moselle murders brought a massive wave of national attention back to Hampton County. In 2023, Sandy Smith, Stephen's mother, raised over $65,000 to hire private investigators. State Law Enforcement Division agents formally reclassified Stephen's death as a homicide. His body was exhumed from the Hampton County Cemetery for a second autopsy. True crime documentaries and podcasts heavily implied that Buster Murdaugh was involved in Smith's death. In June 2024, Buster retaliated. He filed a defamation lawsuit against Netflix and Warner Brothers, explicitly denying any involvement in the 2015 homicide and accusing the media companies of destroying his reputation for profit. He eventually settled the federal lawsuit in early 2026. With Alex serving 2 life sentences, the murders of Paul and Maggie appeared completely resolved. But an entirely different threat to the judicial process had quietly unfolded during the 6-week trial. It was orchestrated not by the defendant, but by the Colleton County Clerk of Court, Rebecca Hill. Hill was responsible for the logistical management of the trial. She swore in witnesses, managed the jury's needs, and ultimately read the guilty verdicts on live television. In August 2023, just months after the trial concluded, she self-published a book titled
Behind the Doors of Justice.
Her desire to capitalize on the tragedy gave the defense team exactly what they needed. Attorneys Dick Haputlian and Jim Griffin began digging into Hill's conduct. They interviewed the jurors who had convicted their client. What they uncovered was a staggering breach of judicial protocol. Hill had engaged in repeated, private conversations with the jury throughout the trial. According to sworn affidavits, Hill frequently entered the jury room. She told the jurors not to let the defense
throw you all off.
When Alex Murdaugh took the witness stand to testify in his own defense, Hill explicitly instructed the jury
not to be fooled
by his performance. The most severe allegation involved a specific panel member, known as Juror 785. Hill perceived this juror as sympathetic to the defense and feared she might vote for an acquittal. Therefore, Hill approached Judge Newman with a printed Facebook post. The post was allegedly written by Juror 785's ex-husband, claiming the juror was drinking and talking about her plans to acquit Alex. Based on this information, Judge Newman removed Juror 785 just hours before deliberations began. But digital forensics proved the Facebook post was completely fabricated. It never existed. The ex-husband denied writing it. The clerk of court had manufactured evidence to manipulate the composition of the jury. When the remaining 12 jurors were sent to deliberate on March 2nd, Hill told them,
"This shouldn't take us long."
She warned the panel that if they debated past 11 p.m., they would be forced to sleep at a hotel. She also denied them their usual smoke breaks, artificially accelerating the deliberation process. She even handed out reporters' business cards to jurors and traveled with them to New York City when they appeared on the Today Show. Alex Murdaugh's legal team immediately filed an appeal, demanding a new trial based on jury tampering. The state attorney general's office fought the motion, arguing that while Hill's behavior was inappropriate, the physical and digital evidence against Alex was so absolute that the verdict should stand. But Hill's credibility was already disintegrating. In December 2023, her co-author stopped the sales of their book after discovering Hill had plagiarized large sections of text from a BBC News reporter. In March 2024, Hill resigned from her elected position amid multiple state ethics investigations into her misspending of federal child support funds. Finally, in December 2025, Rebecca Hill stood in a courtroom as a criminal defendant. She pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice, perjury, and misconduct in office. She admitted in open court that she had revealed sealed exhibits to the media, lied about it under oath, and used her elected position to promote her commercial book.
The judge sentenced her to 3 years of probation, noting the punishment would have been far worse if she hadn't taken a plea deal.
The legal system requires a sterile environment to function. The moment a court official puts their thumb on the scale, the entire apparatus fails. Therefore, the South Carolina Supreme Court was forced to intervene. On May 13, 2026, the 5 justices of the state Supreme Court issued a unanimous 5-0 decision. They ruled that Rebecca Hill's improper external influences had fundamentally violated Alex Murdaugh's constitutional right to a fair trial.
Although we are aware of the time, money, and effort expended for this lengthy trial, we have no choice but to reverse the denial of Murdaugh's motion for a new trial.
The court wrote, the double murder convictions were officially overturned. The slate was wiped clean. The state attorney general immediately announced they will retry Alex Murdaugh. They promised to pursue the case aggressively, though a new trial date has not yet been set. The judicial process will have to start over from the beginning, selecting a new jury, calling the same witnesses, and presenting the same bloody exhibits. Alex Murdaugh is not walking free. He remains locked in a federal penitentiary, serving his 40-year sentence for the financial crimes he readily admitted to. His theft of millions is a closed loop. But the slaughter at the Moselle dog kennels is once again an open legal wound. When the second trial begins, the defense will undoubtedly attack the state's timeline with renewed aggression. They will point out that investigators failed to use Faraday bags to protect the victim's cell phones. They will highlight the lack of a murder weapon and the absence of high-velocity blood spatter on Alex's clothes. They will lean heavily into the theory that two different firearms mean there were two different shooters. But they will never again be able to claim that Alex Murdaugh was asleep on the couch at the main house. The secret iPhone encrypted in the dirt betrayed him. The digital forensics extracted by the Secret Service cannot be unwritten. Because waiting in the state's evidence file, ready to be played for 12 new jurors, is a 58-second video of a chocolate lab.
And 3 voices in the dark, arguing over a bird, less than 5 minutes before the guns went off.
If you want the next real case drawn the same way, subscribe to Criminally Drawn. I'm John T. Thank you for watching.